This is the Black Experience for all. Dr. Nkem Okeke is a Kaizen-spirited C-suite physician executive, award-winning entrepreneur, speaker, and thought leader in primary care transformation and managed care solutions. She is the CEO and founder of Metalinks. She has collectively spent 2 decades as a healthcare executive, advisor, physician, change management facilitator, and an accomplished speaker and entrepreneur.
Thank you so very much. It's an honor to get a chance to talk to you, Dr. Okeke. It's the Black Experience, as you know, is we're about telling the stories of successful Black Americans to help inspire young people and to help eliminate racism. And you're the kind of person that young people need to hear from. I think it can be inspired from. So it's an absolute privilege and honor to have you with us. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me.
So one of the things I'd like to do is I love talking about people's families and what inspired them, their parents, their grandparents, those role models, those inspirations, and what that means to you and what it meant to you. Could we talk about that?
Absolutely. Yes, I do draw inspiration from my parents. My dad had 5 girls and a boy. And in our tradition, because our roots is Nigerian, you were stronger if you had more male children than if you had more female children. So my dad thought he had one leg down with 5 girls and 1 boy. So he thought to himself, well, I have to have that leg up now. So I will train my girls as much as I train my son and invest in them just equally. So from a young age, we were all treated the same. We're all held to the same standard and high expectation. So to be honest, fast forward, I didn't really understand gender parity until I was much older. Because I'm like, how can that be? My mom, on the other hand, was a nurse. And she was very nurturing, always clean, tidy, taking care of things. And by default, to make sure her girls were of marriage quality, she made sure we learned to cook, clean, as well as go to school, because she did all 3. So I do draw inspiration from my parents on both sides. My dad also, in addition to that, he was a trained engineer. He came to the United States and did a double master's in engineering, civil and electrical. And he went back to Nigeria to start his own company. And that's all he did before he retired. So while growing up, we learned about being an entrepreneur. We knew when daddy got a contract, we're happy, more gifts. We knew when he didn't get a contract, which means no extra spending. And every summer, he would summon us up to his company as soon as we were of age to sit and learn where the money came from. Discipline, those core values stayed with me. So I would say combining my learnings from my dad and my mom, I was inspired not to just do what they do, but to be more than they were.
Yes. So tell me, where were you born?
I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay. And how much time did you spend in Pittsburgh?
Not too long. My dad was doing his master's at the time, and that's when he married my mom and they started a family. So I was in Pittsburgh till I was about 4.5, 5 years old. My dad found out from a friend that they had discovered oil in Nigeria. And for those who may know, it is about the 6th largest oil producing country in the world. So with that oil boom, there were a lot of, growth in business and industrialization. And his friend said, hey, we should come start an engineering company and see if we can make it here. So he left the family in Pittsburgh and went back, and they did start a company together, and it was successful. They soon discovered that they could do well by splitting and having their own companies each. And that's what he did. And that's where we went from there. So he kept the family here, and he was there. And after a while, my mom said, I think I want the family to be together. So when I was right about 4.5, 5 years old, she took herself and her 4 kids and went back to Nigeria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So during your time in Pittsburgh, now where did your parents meet?
My parents met in Nigeria.
Okay.
So my dad was doing his finals and he was ill. And my mom was a nurse at the time and sort of was part of his care team. The rest is history. But fast forward, my dad got a full ride scholarship to University of Pittsburgh because at the time he could apply. And this was shortly after the Civil War in Nigeria.
Okay.
He finished just before the Civil War. So right after the Civil War, they opened up more scholarships people apply for, England, United States. So he did apply for scholarships in the United States and he got University of Pittsburgh. So he told us that he decided to teach and help in the educational sector to raise money to pay for my mother's ticket because he had a full ride, but she didn't. And he brought his girl and they settled in Pittsburgh and had a family.
That's great. That's great. And I'm curious, did your father talk much about the Biafran War? What kind of impact that had on him and the family at all?
You know the name, yes, it's Biafran War. Yeah. He did. He said when he had to work in the factory when it was happening because he had people they drafted to go to the front lines, back lines, and things like that. He said it was very dark. He worried many days. He lost family members. He wondered what would happen after the fact. But as soon it didn't last for too long, about 18 months to 24 months. And he said after that, it was just the need to rebuild again. And the Igbo tribe in Nigeria, just if you didn't know already, they're very resilient. So I think after the war was over, there was a need to just build back and build back better. And I don't want to sound like Biden here, but that was the goal. And I think they did build back better. Yeah.
That's wonderful. So no, that's right. To have, your father have those experiences, I say sometimes we have to be sort of shaped by the fire, right? I mean, to go through that and then come out and then, get a full scholarship to the University of Pittsburgh. That's fantastic. And so then when your mother and all of you came back to Nigeria, tell me what that was like in terms of the extended family and the role they had in your life.
In our life. So coming back, I was still young at the time. So we settled in for the most part, except my oldest sister. She was already set in her ways, more Western due to her exposure. So she had to be put in a special British school. The rest of us, they're kind of be fine. So, so that was the first thing. My parents were very aware of what had happened. Mind you, they settled in the north, and the Biafra War, if you remember, was between the Northerners and the Easterners. So very bold to actually go back to that same region to call home. Yes. My mom was born and raised in the north, so for her, this was home in many ways. So that was the first, I guess, aftershock that my parents just kept in the back of their mind. But they loved the north enough to go back there and call it home. So things my dad kind of looked out for is to make sure that we're grounded in our culture, make sure we're grounded in our language, because in the north they speak Hausa and they're more Muslim, and we speak Igbo and we're Christians. So my dad made sure that we stayed grounded, kept family friends that were going to help us know who we were. Mm-hmm. And he went a step further. Every Christmas, you had to pack up your bag and baggage and follow him to the village so that you can get to meet grandma, grandpa. Grandpa died shortly, but cousins, and that happened every single Christmas. It's about an 8-hour trip from the north to the east. And there it was, I think that's how I knew more about my culture. And when it was time to pick a college, for the most part, he made sure we picked a college down in the east too. So
Okay.
That helps.
That's interesting. So do you remember the what the difficulties, if there were any, in terms of, dealing with Christianity, dealing with Muslims, dealing with Hausa, Igbo, the differences there? Did that seem challenging for you growing up?
Challenging, not 100%. We were shielded by a lot. I think there were episodes, I would say, of ethnic clashes that did happen. But where we lived was sort of in a GRA, we called it government reserved area. So most times that's the last place that the bad things come to, if I may say. So, but we did know these things happened. And when they did, they had some localized areas where these happened more than not. And we kind of knew what it was. So in the north, you also have the Southern Kaduna indigents who were Christian. So they, by every sense and purpose, tried to always partner with the Igbos who lived there, who were Christians as well. So when you had those ethnic uprising, we kind of came together to quell it. And I would say for the most part, most of the Muslims at the time I was growing up were very, even-headed, even key, my neighbors and all. But you had those fanatics that would push the envelope. So those concerns were there, but it wasn't as blatant as it's been lately in Nigeria. So it was not too much of a concern. I would say there was one time when this famous politician called Abiola ran for office, and they feared he may win, and it became a bloodbath. So all the Igbos had to leave the north, including my family. And this was trying to remember the date. I want to say it's 1992, thereabout. Okay. And 93, thereabout. And then we moved, it came back when the dust settled. So that was a concern. That was a struggle. But other than that, nothing major. Language wasn't really an issue. My mom spoke the language well. We understood enough to be dangerous. But, the lingua franca, which means the national language in Nigeria, was English. It still is English because of our colonizers. So we went to school in English. Everything was in English. So that was a unifier, even though we have multiple languages in Nigeria.
No, thank you for sharing that. So I'm curious, you've got to tell me then, you must have a couple of wonderful stories about visiting your grandparents in the villages. Tell me what that was like.
I mean, yeah, going to the village the first time, it was a number of things, especially when I became of age. So first things first, you have to understand that we lived in the city, and going to the village, you began to see things which we consider backward. You had the well, where you got water from the well. So you had to learn how to put the bucket in and pull out the water from the well. Still continuing on that path of water. My cousins who lived in the village would go to the stream so they can get drinking water upstream, because the one for washing clothes was downstream. And when we go there, we had pots that you carry on your head, and it became an act to actually take a cloth, and wrap around to serve as a base on your head, and you put the pot. And you competed because you're not supposed to hold on to it. You're supposed to be able to balance on your head and walk all the way. So it became something that I think I can still do it. I haven't tried it in a while, but those were just real moments and memories being close to nature. Yeah. Of course, there's this other side where you had a hole in the ground called toilet. And I'm like, that's, and the funny thing is that as things advanced, like my grandma's house, you built the newer house, which was more modern, in the front. And you usually preserved the old clay house with all those things in the back. Yes. And somehow the grandma will leave all the fancy house that you built and go to the back. and they have an empty space where you put the wood and you cook with the wood. And, so it was nice to see those things and know of those things. And fast forward, when I came to the United States and I led a Girl Scout troop, they said, oh, we're going camping. And they're like all excited. I'm like, this is how people live, it's just not a weekend thing. Like, the biffies. I'm like, what's that? So it's so funny that it became a food truck like that.
Well, no, those are great stories. And I've been fortunate enough to spend time in Africa and go out to the villages. And that's right. I mean, it's, I know one of the things, I told you about my father and they, building wells in the villages, and because that's right, women had to walk miles to go down to get to the river or stream to get the water, and they would carry it on their heads, and it was amazing to watch them do that, and to be able to spend a few nights in some of the villages. That's right, the hole in the ground, it took a lot to get used to, but you really realize. What was really amazing is that I remember saying to my dad at times, you almost like you feel bad, right? But he's like, don't feel bad. I said, these people, these are some of the happiest. They're happy. People are proud. They work hard every single day, and they love their community. They love their families. It just happens to be this is how they live. But there's nothing to feel sorry for people, and that was a great lesson. That you don't have to have riches and all other kinds of things to be happy, to be proud, to have a strong community, to have a strong family. So I think that's true. I think that's.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I was saying I think that's what you're alluding to, and it's very powerful.
And something to add to what your dad said is, I think part of what also kept them happy was they were healthy, because almost every family or household had a farm, so everything was fresh from the farm to the to the dining table. And if you wanted meat, they would have their own poultry, where you have the chickens here, the goat there, the farm, and the yams and the rice and things like that. So it was really nice to see.
Yes. And so I'm curious, all those Christmases, do you remember any sort of words of wisdom from your grandparents that you sort of treasure today?
Yes, I do. So the one that came to mind just organically is my grandma. She'll say, she was a very petite woman. And her husband was 6'4". So depending on the hit or miss, some of us got it, some of us, I consider myself tall. So whenever you came around and we talked about heights and who's going tall and who's going short and things like that, and she heard those arguments, she would come and say this. And she said, I hope you see the deeper meaning to what I'm about to say. You are taller than me, but you're sure not shorter than me. Choose one. So I think she was trying to communicate whatever God has given you, that's your superpower. So you own it. So I like that.
Yes, that's terrific. So then how long did you spend in Nigeria, Nkem?
Oh, wow. I left when I was about 5, came back when I was about 28. So that's
23 years. Okay. All right. And so then tell me what schooling was like for you, and what sort of led you on this road to healthcare.
Nice. So schooling for me started off with my father. He was an educator at heart. So we never had a tutor. Daddy was the tutor. He made time every single time. And this is for all 6 children. While doing that, he also had a litmus test to determine if you were going to be one of 2 things, a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. Those were the only options he gave. He said, well, I'm an engineer, your mom's a nurse, so I'll upgrade her. So doctor is the only other option for the kids. And his litmus test to determine which one you did, or he will sign you up for, was what you scored in math. So if you made an A1 or A+, you call it here, then you had to be an engineer. If you made an A2 or A-, or anything else, you cannot be an engineer. So you see me here with my A minus, all proud, and he's like, I'm like, Daddy, why? Why can I not be an engineer? I really wanted to do geology to start with. I love geography. And he's like, you are excellent in biology. And besides, you got an A minus in math. I said, well, but I passed. He said, let me tell you the difference. You see your big sister and your big brother, if I woke them up in the morning and I gave them a quadratic equation, an algebraic equation, they solved it with eyes closed. If I gave that same problem to you, you wake up, brush your teeth, take a bath, probably have milk, and then get to work. He said, so you'll get there, all right? It's just that it comes more natural to them. My prayer for you is to do what comes naturally to you, because you have fun doing it.
Yeah.
So that's what he did. So that sort of shaped my path. And my mom, of course, being a nurse was not going to be in his way. Yeah, she should be a doctor. We need one. So that's how I started on my path. So when I started school, I got into medical school at 16. We used the British system. So it's not unusual. My brother got into college at 15. So now, how did we do that? There is like an SAT exam we call GCE. That's the equivalent. And my dad will make sure you start taking that 2 years before you graduate high school to prep you. So you knew what to expect. Yeah. So that's what happened with my brother. I don't want to say it was a fluke, but he did so well. So he might as well start school, and same thing for me. So I did go into medical school. And I think at the time when I got into medical school, I was one of the youngest, but I think the sense of pride in excelling in what you do came full circle. This was the first time I was leaving home. And I knew the only one thing that will ask me if he saw me was, what's your score? How did you do? So I had to make sure I had the right answer. So that kept me going until I even became more aware of who I was as a person, because I'm 16 and I'm still trying to learn who I was. I love people. I love to help people. So I had the elements to be a great doctor, and it all kind of all aligned, and I made friends. So spent 6 years plus 2 with strike. We'll talk about that another day, thanks to Nigeria, and graduated in my early 20s. And at that point in time, I told my mom I would like to go to Ghana to do my postgrad, which I did. And the reason why I chose Ghana was my mom was a part of a club that my dad was a part of, the Rotary Club. And the women's arm of that was called International Inner Wheel Club. And she was the West African regional president at a point in time and had a meeting in Ghana. So I went with her and I loved it. So I said, I'd like to come back here. So lucky for me.
Was that in Accra?
Yes.
Okay.
So lucky for me, my uncle was the ambassador at the time. Okay. Sample Ichuku. So she called her cousin and said, my daughter needs a spot. He said, we'll make it work. And he did. So I went to Ghana and I was living in the embassy house with my uncle. And that's why I did my postgraduate at KorleBu Teaching Hospital.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. So when you went off to medical school, how far away was that from your parents' home?
8 hours.
8 hours.
Drive. All right. But a 30-minute drive to the village now where grandma was. You know my dad. He's like, keep an eye on her. And my uncles and some relatives.
Oh, good. All right.
Yeah. So and my great-grandma was alive at the time. She passed away in my 4th year medical school because we do the straight 6 years, including pre-med in there. And I will go often to see my great-grandmother. She couldn't walk at the time, but she was funny. She didn't speak English, so I learned more how to communicate in my language with her, and just loved her.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
So I'm curious, because I think you had said you were interested in geography. Is that what you said?
Sir.
Okay. So in retrospect, your father gave you 2 choices, and obviously it's turned out extremely well. But do you ever wonder about maybe if you had said, well, is there a third choice, or can I do this? Or if you had done something else, Do you ever think about that?
To be honest with you, I would like to answer that question in another segment because I'm actually thinking of writing a book about it. So
Okay.
it's a loaded question, but I will answer it this way. Yes and no. No, because what I have tried to do is not have regrets or say, should have, had I. What I try to do is say, I have the chance and the opportunity every day to make it my own. Okay. So when I had the chance, I did go into public health, and my goal there was to understand the world and how it sees healthcare. So I still brought that element of understanding and wanted to know about geography itself into healthcare. What does it mean? How is this different from here? What are the social determinants in your environment that impact you? So I think my message to anyone who thought, it for different circumstances, I wish we had more money, or I wish, things were different. I wish X, Y, Z, I could have done that, is that once you wake up every morning, you're still alive, still find ways to pull elements of what that should have been into where you are. And you realize all is not lost, actually.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. No, and I can't wait to read the book. So, so then tell me now. So, you're in Accra. How long are you in Ghana for?
I was in Ghana for almost 3 years.
3 years. And tell me then, during that 3-year period, what are you studying, and what are you thinking about where you want to go in terms of medicine? So
first things first, I was trying to take in the difference, because even though Nigeria and Ghana are close, it's an hour flight, there's a lot of differences. Nigeria is patrilineal, Ghana is matrilineal. So even understanding that concept was different. Mm-hmm. Ghana had a more simpler way of being and a more simpler way of coordinating things, which I hadn't seen before. They have been fortunate to have Jerry Rawlings as their president for many, many years, which provided some structure and direction, which had we not had a coup in Nigeria, we probably would have been better off with that, but we didn't have a regime that we thought could have lasted to give us that. And I think we're still suffering from that in Nigeria till today. But Ghana has been able to leverage the foundation that Jerry Rawlings put in there, and I could see it. So those were the things that I tried to emulate, try to understand better. One of the professors there, he actually called me and said, they pay you more in Nigeria than they pay you here. Why are you here? I know. And I said, because I wanted change. I wanted to see how it's done differently. And he said, well, thank you. And he told anyone who cared to listen, say, you don't ever say anything wrong about Dr. Okoye at the time I made a name. He said, because she came here to serve our people. Yeah. Because as you do your internship, postgraduate, you are actually there to serve people.
So I'm curious, you talked about Jerry Rawlings, and I'm curious, do you know that, do you recall what at that time, the effect of Nkrumah, did that still have any kind of bearing on Ghana? Do you recall?
I don't recall 100%, no.
Okay, I was just curious.
I don't, but I do know that he left a lasting impact in terms of, can you make Ghana a place you'd be proud to call home? And I think that level of awareness of being a citizen of their country really changed and transformed Ghana to what it is today. It's not perfect by any means, but if you went to Nigeria, you went to Ghana, you can tell the difference now. Yeah. But, again, we cannot take away from the fact that Ghana is a whole lot smaller.
Yes.
Compared to Nigeria, but for what they have, I think they've done a good job. I enjoyed being with the people. I had to learn Chui a little bit so I can communicate with the patients. So I had my book I carried around. And then on a side note, so fun stuff, I joined the salsa club and I learned how to dance salsa.
Well, is that going to be a chapter in the book?
Aha! Because I never became professional. Who knows? But I have time.
Yeah, all right. That's right.
The day I meet Beyonce, we might have a contract. She can help me out.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, no. So as you're finishing up your 3 years, tell me what are your professors trying to guide you in a particular way? What are you thinking you want to do after you graduate?
So the U.S. influence in Ghana was huge. So I was exposed to a lot of projects that were going on through USAID, the World Health, and things like that. So I at that point wanted to go into public health so I could learn more, and that's what I did. So that did shape me in some ways. That said, I already started changing my mind about bedside clinical practice. The reason being is that when you are in West Africa, for the most part, they could post you to a place that you're the only doc. So the way we train post, graduating from medical school is such that let's make it an all-round training, because you may not have an OBGYN, you may not have a surgeon. So you have to do rotations across the 4 major departments or disciplines: medicine, surgery, peds, and OBGYN. And in all of that, you have to learn how to do cesarean section. You have to learn how to defer spontaneous vaginal delivery, do simple surgery like appendectomy and things like that, because you could be posted to a rural area where you all they have.
Yes.
So I think the level of training was very in-depth and very helpful. However, there were some decisions that I had to deal with. For example, if a patient comes in complaining of a severe headache, they feel like they've had a head injury, there were certain protocols to take before we go all the way to MRI. And this was all because we're trying to control cost if it was not going to be paid out of pocket. So I will question policies like that, and they'll say, well, the committee decided. I'm like, what's this committee? I was bold enough to go to the chief medical director's office. He said, yes, the committee. I said, can I join this committee? And he laughed at me the way you did, almost like, and I felt so small. I said, I'm going to fix this. So I would make sure I have a seat at the table and become a physician executive. Mm-hmm. Because he was a physician, but now had transitioned to the executive side where he calls the shot. And I felt that, these people actually make decisions that impact those who are in the front lines. And I think if I want to do the best and the most good, that's where I should be headed. So.
Okay. That's fascinating. I mean, and did you have, so you're gaining all this wealth of knowledge and experience. Was there anything that potentially drew you to say, maybe I'd like to work in more of a rural setting?
No, because I knew the work hadn't finished. I knew I still wanted to travel the world and learn more about the ecosystem of healthcare at this point now. I knew enough to know that what I knew in this small space that I lived was not it all, was not everything. Okay. So I was more curious about learning as much as I could, and then come to a point where I could consolidate my learning. I do consider myself a global citizen. So whatever it is I do want to feel like it's going to impact the world. So that's where my thought process was at the time.
So after you graduate, where do you decide to go, Nkem?
So Ghana, and then after Ghana and I was there, I decided I got admission to Tulane, New Orleans, and then I came over to do my master's in public health. And it was very interesting because the microcosm that you find in New Orleans itself was the best way to be reintroduced to America. So social determinants of health is a buzzword now. I saw it back then. This is 2004. And we kind of tried to address that under our public health projects and programs that were happening locally. My major was not epidemiology. My major was global health. So by virtue of that, most of my courses was pretty much around that. We had some courses we took outside the country. Most notably, the one that was my favorite was in Thailand. We had to spend 6 weeks there with our professor. Okay. And we were learning about how HIV was curbed because Thailand was recognized as the best developing country that were able to reduce the incident rates of HIV. So my professor thought, what better way than to learn? Yeah. So we went there, checked in the hotel, and then throughout the weeks, he had Minister of Health, different universities. So it was really learning and being. And at night, we went into the clubs and the stuff so we could understand the social life and why they were able to do what they did. And there's a lot to share there, but the one thing I will share with you that mattered was that they legalized prostitution. So hotels were registered companies, and the prostitutes had a license. So by virtue of that, they were tested, and you could not come and be with any of them without being tested. They had a routine. So because of that, it was another way that it could put things in check. So I thought that was very interesting.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm curious, in retrospect, when you think about Tulane, what made you decide to go there? What was attractive about? I know you talked about the city, New Orleans, but in terms of the school itself, what attracted you to Tulane? Nkem?
So I had two key schools in mind. One was Johns Hopkins, and the other was Tulane. Okay. Johns Hopkins because they have a very broad international reach, and I wanted a program that understood where I was coming from, that understood the African healthcare system to an extent. Tulane also had, it was not just a school of public health, it was a school of public health and tropical medicine. So the fact that that was the name of the public health school was endearing for me, because tropical medicine means they think outside the box. Besides that, I think also part of why it was tropical medicine is that you had some diseases that were unique to New Orleans, like Black fever and things which you would find, in the tropical areas or nations too. So I think they got a sense of how the international or global world, kind of ties into what happens here in the United States. So I thought that those two will align more with my background and where I was coming from.
So then obviously Tulane won out. Obviously, I know, everyone is familiar with Johns Hopkins, but you decided to go to Tulane.
Well, that's where I got. If Hopkins had called me, who knows? But I ended up working there. So all in God's time.
That's right. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. What's interesting, you raised a fascinating question about, you mentioned that there were some tropical diseases that existed in New Orleans area that you were able to study. And that's fascinating, because you don't necessarily, well, I don't as a layperson, you're not thinking about here in the United States, there might be a particular disease that's particular to a particular place, right? So that's fascinating. So tell me how that kind of worked. I mean, what is Black fever?
So what is unique about New Orleans at the time is that they had, the climate is different, and in some ways it mirrors the climate you see in some African countries. Mm-hmm. So you had, the collection of different, watersheds and that will breed the mosquitoes and, and things like that were probably left unattended to. Mm-hmm. And of course, we know that it has a funny geographical configuration where things kind of valley into it. And there was a lot of environmental issues. So I think because of that, you had some illnesses that further down, much earlier on, they had eradicated, but it was unique to that environment because of those geographical constraints that they had. So I think that's why the tropical medicine started there, because they had to learn what's unique to New Orleans and make sure that and the neighboring cities, and also treat for it. So that's where the alignment came, at least the best I understood.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. So you went to Thailand, and
Yes.
was there any other place that you guys went?
So Thailand, we did Bangkok and Chiang Mai. Fast forward, some people did some visits to Vietnam. I did to Malaysia.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. So, all right. So then now, after Tulane, what's next for you?
So at this time, I took a course in accounting. It was a core requirement, and it was fantastic. I aced it.
Accounting.
I aced it again. I know. Accounting in healthcare. Oh my God. My professor said, you need to do an MBA. I said, well, I want to own my business, so I will do an MBA. So fast forward, I said, okay, I started searching because I finished my last course the 2 weeks before Hurricane Katrina hit.
Wow.
And what was unique also is that if you came to Tulane at that time, if you're a foreign medical grad, they would waive credits for you. So while my roommate had to take 64 credits, I only had to take 32. So I said, how can I get this over with? So I finished my MPH in 9 months. I pretty much split it to 18 credits. How much can I take at one time? Okay, I'll do it. It wasn't too much looking in hindsight. I mean, I still made it out with 3.7, but I could have made a 4.0 had I slowed down a bit. So, but that's that said, so that was in my mind. So I started researching what I would need to do my MBA. Did I have to take GMAT and this and that and the other? But again, I was displaced. Went ahead. At this time, I got married while I was, in Tulane. I went back, got married, came back. So I got pregnant for my first child. So at this point in time, reality hit. I was not free to move about as I please. I had to be responsible.
Yes,
and
yes.
with all of that, I said, okay, how do I align my career goals and ambition with being a mother? And that is a conflict a lot of women have to face, and I was one of them too.
Yes.
So I sort of put that thought in the back burner until one day, I kid you not, I was checking my email and then it popped up in my Yahoo on the side. I'm not sure if you remember back then, they just show you some ad and it said online MBA program at George Washington University. I'm like, is this real? I clicked on it. And sure enough, it was true. So I said, you know what? If it's online, then they're giving me a chance. So online learning gave me the opportunity to now go back and get my MBA. So I would work in the day, mother in between, and then at night I would light the midnight candle and do the needful. So.
Yeah. And during this period, where are you located? Are you still in New Orleans?
No, now I'm in Southern Virginia.
Oh, now you're in Virginia. Okay.
Yes.
Wow. So you weren't very busy at all, I guess. You had a lot of free time. So that's amazing. So now what is your husband doing at this time?
Good question. So we met in medical school. And when I said I was going to come back to the United States, wasn't something that he was keen on. His father was a physician. He inherited his dad's hospital in Nigeria. And as the first son, he was supposed to carry on the legacy. And but we always had an open conversation about my dreams and where I wanted to be versus where he wanted to be, even before we started dating. So he did not want to be in my way of happiness, so to speak. So we thought about it, talked about it for a long time, and we were okay to kind of live apart. So when I had my first child, he was not here, but he had his big sister and her husband, who was a physician too, who lived close by. So I had family.
Okay.
And then I decided to have a conversation with him about filing, at least so he can get, his citizenship just in case. And he was open to that. So I started filing, and trust me, I didn't know that I could hire a lawyer. I just was told to go to USCIS.gov, and I did, and I followed the instructions. So by every sense of the word, I guess I played lawyer, but I went through the process, the soups to not start to finish, by myself, until he got his visa to come over when our daughter was about a little over a year old. So at that point, the decision was, yes, we're here, but I will sort of go back and forth to Nigeria and back till we figure it out.
Okay. No, again, thank you for sharing that. So I'm curious, when did this idea that you wanted to have your own company in terms of health, when do you remember that sort of first entering your mind, Nkem?
Watching my dad say that he is the boss and he controls his time. So that has always been in the back of my mind. I did not appreciate it then, but as soon as I became a mother, and I had to be at certain places at certain times because someone told me to, then I realized what he said.
Yeah.
So at that point in time, I felt, okay, I think this is something that I mean, by no means did he work any less harder. He just had some more flexibility with when and how, right? So I sort of knew that I had to build the foundation to be able to set myself up to be able to do that successfully. So I became busy quickly. So one thing most people would know is that if you're in a company, if you don't have a sponsor, please find the next company. It doesn't get better. And I was passed up many times for promotion. And mind you, now I'm working as a public health official, and it didn't make sense to me. So I soon realized I was living in a place where it was not conducive for someone like me, with maybe my accent or my name, I have no clue. But I couldn't see anything else that was the reason, right? So I left. And I promised myself when I was leaving that if I come into an organization, I have 1 year to tell you if I have a sponsor who sees me for who I am and the value I can bring. And if I don't see that, I'm off. So it was very uncomfortable to start over again many times, but that did two things. It gave me clarity of what I needed and my quest to find it, but it also gave me the opportunity to work with big companies in healthcare, Kaiser, Permanente, Hopkins, and then eventually the healthcare sector of Booz Allen. So those three experiences back to back sort of solidified my learning by applying all I had learned so far. So I felt, you know what, I can do this now because I built the network. I have proven myself to the clients I worked for. And then now I think I know enough to do it differently. And what is different about Medical Links, which is my company, is that we pride ourselves to be not just a management consulting firm, but we are a population health management firm. So we do the sexy work of meeting with executives to brainstorm a strategy based on their pain points. But you know what? If they need help to execute that plan, we bring a team to do that as well. And this includes direct patient care as needed. And our bread and butter is understanding that population health centers on the community services that is offered to the members of your health plan or the patients of your practice. So we come with the team-based approach where we have the community health worker who's in the community, understanding what the social determinants are of health for the patient and supporting them. And then there are a connection to the clinical care manager who can help you understand and better educate you about your chronic condition. And these two groups of care providers who call wraparound care management support, they are working side by side with the primary care physician's practice by getting them up to speed with what may be happening with this patient outside of the doctor's office, which is very important. with what is happening inside the doctor's office.
So you had said something, I just want to go back for a second. You said about it was very important to have a sponsor, in the job that you were working in. You talked about you left. Where did you leave that wasn't providing that foundation for you? If you don't mind.
You want to get me in trouble?
Well, no, you don't have to mention it, Jen. I don't want to get you in trouble. But you make a great point about you're working for a company, and if you don't have a sponsor or a mentor, a champion, then that's right. You're possibly stuck in a dead end, and you need that. You need someone who wants to champion your cause, and that's what you're talking about, correct?
That is absolutely correct. And mind you, the reason why I could tell you the name of the organization, the reason why I would choose not to is because the fact it didn't work out for me didn't mean it didn't work out for others.
Sure, I understand.
You just have to know that it's not working out for you and figure out your next steps. Don't stay there and think that what you see is not what you see. It's true. And I think you can tell when somebody is your champion.
Yes. And so after you got your MBA from GW, and then you worked in the private sector for a number of years. In the back of your mind, again, you're always thinking about you want to be your own boss.
That is correct.
And your company now, what was it that made you decide that this was the right fit for you? This company, this idea that you wanted to start this company and do all these amazing things. What made it click for you that this was right for you?
What made it clear was really understanding the healthcare landscape that I was playing in. So I did not get my license to practice here. However, I knew that for me to be able to have impact, I needed to understand what it means to provide patient care here. So while I was in South Hill, I did volunteer to work at the University of Chapel Hill. And by volunteering to be in the family medicine department, I was able to get a certification as a certified medical assistant, because that allowed them not to be liable from an insurance perspective for me to engage patients. But I would, meet with the patients, I would check their vitals, I would pretty much prep the patient for the physician and go beyond because I could, like the residents there, and then present to the attending. So I was lucky to be offered an observership that spanned almost a year. So, and at the time they were implementing Epic, which is an electronic healthcare system. So I was immersed in it, and I worked my job, but I took 2 days of my PTO time to do this. And it was a 30-minute commute, but I mean, the hustle is real. But I was clear what I needed to know, because that would make me a whole lot more grounded. But I was not also 100% sold on going the whole route of redoing my medical exam and getting this license when I knew the ultimate goal was to be where I sit. So I had to figure out a way to do the needful, because you cannot cut corners when it has to do with human lives. So that's what happened. And while I was doing my MBA, it became a dual degree in my last semester. I know most of my colleagues checked out, but I checked it. So I did graduate with a master's in business administration as well as project management.
So tell me about, obviously you have a very strong foundation, very, very positive, very, very committed, and you don't let obstacles get in your way. But tell me some of the challenges you faced as a woman of color, as a woman from Africa. Obviously, you've overcome all of them. But tell me a little bit about some of those challenges, Nkem.
Thank you, and thank you for breeding the goodwill that I've overcome. I'm still overcoming, but I appreciate I've come this far, right?
Yes.
Wow. So coming first of all to New Orleans, I noticed some things I was not aware of. My father, even though he lived here, he never, when my brother had come back before me and I was leaving, my sister had gone to England, he never talked about racism. He never talked about prejudice. But he did tell us about value. And he said, the white man knows value. If you know your self-worth and you know the value you bring, you will be valued. And that's all he said about racism. So fast forward, when I came, I saw it and I didn't recognize it. I just said, didn't I say hi to that lady the other day? Why is she ignoring me? And my girlfriends will be like looking at me like, oh, girl, where have you been? Well, you don't know this and you don't know that. So I really, in many ways, at 28 years old, I was in kindergarten when it comes to understanding.
Yeah. No.
So, but I understood it, and then I became paranoid for a bit, because when I saw something, I'd be like, oh, it's because I'm Black, my accent, this and that and the other. And that's another layer of it, because even though I had African-American friends that embraced me, I had some that didn't. And then there's this whole story of history of, okay, this is why, and this is then the other. So after a while, I said, you know what, I'm going to let this be, because it's too much brain power to think about things differently. So how about we do this? Let's talk about impact. So as long as what you're doing impacts me a certain way, the response you get is equal to the impact. So if you come at me, you're all respectful, all nice, that's what you get back. If you come at me all disrespectful, you get that back too. Not that I'll disrespect you, but I'll ignore you.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care whether you're blue, Black, or green, because that's the way I have to function, so that I'm not all in my head, because it became too obvious when I realized that I didn't want to believe it was true. Yeah.
So no, thank you. No, that's I got you. So as a woman, because even to this day, there's a disproportionate number of male doctors versus female doctors, and certainly of color and not of color. But so as a woman, were there any special challenges that you sort of had to deal with, Nkem?
To be honest with you, there probably were more than I did notice, because again, my upbringing is 5 girls and a son in my father's household, and he's treating us just as my brother. He is being, some few things the boys have to do, but for the most part, he invested in us just like he did our brother. So even though I noticed it here and there that there was gender parity in certain circumstances, I never internalized it. Like, I didn't dwell with it. So, but in exchange, people will say things like aggressive, bold, doesn't know her place, all kinds of funny stuff. And in my opinion, I'm just confident.
Yes.
When you get to know me, I think, in my opinion, down to earth, real. I just show up, and I show up because that's what I was taught to do. And I think that helped me. So I must thank my father for making me see that there were men who will respect a woman as she should be. And I could not expect any less of society. And I navigated my career that way. And I think that's what helped. So now that I have my own company, I'm aware about making sure that women in this company, we're now 25 and counting, come in here and I say, you know what, you can make this what you want it to be. The sky is your limit.
Yes, well, I noticed, on your website, that's right. I think I only saw one gentleman. So I empowering women.
3.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So tell me, I'm going to let you go in a minute, but let me ask you this. And you talked about so beautifully about your father and your mother, but tell me, coming to the United States, from professors to colleagues, and I know you talked about, if you didn't have a sponsor, you moved on. But can you just reflect on any mentors or champions that you've had over the years that really mean a great deal to you?
Absolutely. The first one that comes to mind is Barbara Hotelling. She was a nurse, a lead nurse at the University of Chapel Hill, family medicine. She recognized what was going on. She recognized the struggle. She recognized you're already a practicing physician, but you have to do it over. So the respect, and she's the one who actually paved the way to make sure I got that observatory and stood by my side. Then Miss Gracie Golson, she was my boss where I worked, and while she couldn't do much in terms of promote me or things like that, she always made me know that if I needed time off to do anything, to pursue the bigger dream, she would make sure that I got that. And then finally at Hopkins, Johns Hopkins Healthcare, my boss there, Ed Kimian, he was just a different person. He was a CFO at the time of the largest Medicaid health plan in the country, controlled about $1.7 billion with a B. And I was hired for a new position called Special Projects Director, and I was supposed to help with cost containment initiatives, only because we had to find a safe way not to say I'm doing some other people's job. But he gave me leeway to just be. He said, you have the clinical background, the business background, and I think there's a bridge there that you can, close. And that's what I started doing. So I would work with the provider group at the Hopkins Community Physician and focused a lot of our initial pilots in Baltimore City. And my boss pays the bill. So we'll figure it out and see if the health plan can meet their goals in terms of measuring performance, as well as the providers met their goal in providing quality care. We've since then published 2 papers on initiatives we started off at Hopkins, but that was just him giving me free rein to be. And he was just such a super supporter. And right now, because of him, Hopkins Healthcare is my client.
Well, that's wonderful. That's you've been very blessed. That's haven't you? I mean,
eventually. The hustle was real, but I got it. I was looking for it.
Well, from your grandmother's advice about, what did you say? You're not as tall as me, but basically accept who you are.
You're not shorter than me either. Yeah. You can be taller than me, but you're sure not shorter than me.
That's right. That's right. So no, that's fantastic. And do you have you talk about this this philosophy foundation at your company about you tell your employees, the women in particular, that they can do their own thing. They can in this environment they can make their own space and achieve their dreams. So that's you're passing it on, aren't you? You're passing it forward, and that's fantastic.
I am, and I think the one thing that I've observed is that I don't know what their backgrounds are. I don't know what society has done to them or by them. But for the most part, sometimes I see them dream smaller. So I said, no, we have an IDP, which is individual development plan. I want you to know that this is a 50-50. 50% is what is on your job description, that you owe the company as we compensate you for. The other 50 is what you want to be when you grow up. We have to make sure it works hand in hand. So dream, master's, PhD, where do you want to be in 5 years? It would be great if you want to be here, but I hope it's elsewhere. So I challenge them to say, where do you want to be in 5 years? And how can we be part of your journey as you are part of our journey? I said, if you leave medical links, whether you're here a year, 5 years, if you turn around and say that was a good company to work with, then I think we've done our job.
Yes. Well, that certainly says a great deal about you and your leadership style. That's a lot of companies aren't preaching what you're preaching. So obviously you've learned, developed your own style, which is it's exciting, and it would seem to me that the people that work with you and for you, that's a phenomenal place for them to be. So congratulations for everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much.
And on that note, I've kept you, and thank you so much. I'd love to get a chance to talk to you at some other time if you have the time. It's been an absolute privilege and an honor to talk to you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
You have a great evening, and good luck with your 16-year-old.
I know. We need to get a car. Well, thank you. Well, I'll come to you so you can give me advice,
All right. That sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This is the Black Experience for all. If you like what you hear at the Black Experience, please consider clicking on the Join button to support our nonprofit. I'm Adam P. Kennedy. Thank you for joining us. This is the Black Experience for all.